Hello, everybody. Welcome on our new episode of the Way Out of Childhood Trauma. And our today host is artist and author Jimmi Toro. Oh, welcome on our podcast.
Thank you.
So, Jimmi, can you tell us something about your background? Like, I heard that you have quite story of childhood trauma. Can you tell us, listeners, what is the key things you would like to tell people?
Sure, you bet. So in the realm of childhood trauma, as you know, there are a lot of degrees and a lot of levels of trauma, right? And some trauma can happen once and it can affect somebody awful. Some trauma can happen a whole lot of years. Some trauma will happen by, let's say, an abusive father or something like that, and other trauma can happen by a whole bunch of other people. You can be human trafficked somewhere to other people who commit the trauma. In my particular case, it happened from about age 3 to about age 8, and it happened in more of a ritualistic, uh, religious, sexual torture type of trauma. And in that situation, these adults, they would gather together. If you imagine like the American Ku Klux Klan, are you familiar with that?
Yeah,
Where they wear their white robes and they do these ceremonies and whatnot. That's the kind of awfulness I was caught up into as a little kid, and they do the absolute worst things to little kids. It's amazing what they do, and trying to understand why they do that and how some kids actually endure and make it out of that and others do not. And so that's my story. And then, as you know, if you're a little kid, or maybe anybody, and something traumatic happens to you, if you have somebody to go to, like right on the heels of that, for safety and protection, you can release that trauma right there. If you do not, it's more likely you're going to hold that all in. You're going to suppress that, and it's possible that you could go through much of your adulthood and not even remember it.
Yeah.
And one day it could come and hit you like a ton of bricks, which is my scenario. So I'm 60 years old now. When I was 45, the first these traumatic events started coming back to me, but they came back in a physical form. I had no memory of the actual trauma. It's just this physical thing was attacking me, and I didn't know why. And it was awful, awful, awful. My body would shake uncontrollably. My heart rate would go through the roof. It's like an extreme panic attack, if you will.
Yeah.
Super, super painful. It literally felt like it was trying to kill me, whatever it was. So for 14 years, I had those, probably 2 or 3 average a week.
Okay, that's awful.
And that's one of the awful things about trauma coming back as an adulthood. Sometimes it's triggered. In my case, it wasn't triggered. They came when they came, completely unannounced. And then last year, 2022, after 14 years of this, I had the first memory come back. And it got worse. It got way, way worse. And so for about 9 months, I had hundreds of these memories come back, one on top of each other. And it's in that process where I figured out how to heal from it. And it's an unfortunate reality that many kids who go through awful abuse never heal. As you know, they become addicts to alcohol and drugs, pornography, etc. And they live their whole life in an unhealed state, and then they die, and that's so sad. So there's a lot to unpack there if you want to.
So what helped you when the memories come back? What was the key thing which helped you to recovery? Like what helped you to stop, like you kind of release it and move forward from it?
Yeah, good question. As you know, there are a lot of different modalities out there from different therapists and psychologists to try to help deal with trauma. Some work for some people, some don't work. I think some are just honestly silly and don't work, period. It's just my opinion. There was a documentary I saw not too long ago these four gentlemen who are about my age. When they were young kids, they were abused by the clergy. I think it was up in Canada somewhere.
Mhm.
And they dealt with this trauma their whole life, held on to it. And they had a therapist come in and use the modality or the therapy of like drama or acting. Have you heard of
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, yeah.
And I watched this documentary, and it didn't hit me right. It's just like
Mhm.
it almost seemed silly because they actually had one of the victims, who's an adult now. They had one of the victims play the part of the priest who abused him.
Mhm.
and and I don't know. I'm not an expert in this subject, but I just thought that's crazy. I thought
Mhm.
that's not going to work, and I don't know that it ever did. It didn't
Mhm.
seem like it.
Yeah.
So there's all these ways of treating it. In my specific way, I worked with a really good psychologist, and she taught me this idea of where you, uh, well, in my case, when these episodes hit me, they just hit me.
Mhm.
No control when they hit, and when they hit, um, my challenge was to go back and name the emotion.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, as far as I
Awesome.
understand, it's it's not uncommon to not remember every detail of a particular trauma, instead to remember fragments of it. So the memory's
Yeah.
there. But what was more poignant for me was the emotion,
Mhm.
the smell, the
Mhm.
the feeling of it.
Mhm.
Um, and as I went back there, it was really fascinating. It was adult me going and finding the little me.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh.
Sometimes I could go find him quickly. Other times I had to search and search and search. But as I was going on the search to find this little guy, I could connect with what emotion. Was
Mhm.
it fear? Was it scared? Was it loneliness? Was it lost? Was it not being heard?
Mhm.
Was it uh, being frozen in fear?
Yeah.
And so one could name what I was feeling inside. I could actually go find that little guy,
Mhm.
and I did not go back to that situation as one who rescues him. I went back as one who supported him.
Yeah.
He had to do the rescuing,
Mhm.
and so often I would find him in an awful situation, right in the middle of some just horrific stuff, and I could sneak up behind him and whisper in his ear, say, "What would you like to do?" And sometimes he would be shocked that somebody actually cared,
Mhm. Yeah.
and his little eyes would light up, and like you see little kids, you tell little kids, "Hey, we're going to Disneyland," and their eyes light up of the possibility, and and that's where the magic begins.
Mhm.
That's the fascinating part of the healing for me, is like he could make up anything.
Mhm.
He, angels appear to help him. He could have anything magical
Mhm.
appear. Once he was this evil lady was grabbing him and was going to take him into this room where they were doing these horrible things. And right before she grabbed him, I whispered in his ear, "What do you want to do?" And he says, "I want to freeze her." And
Mhm.
she literally froze like in a block of ice,
Mhm.
which allowed us to get out of there. So as you know, the one thing that kid wants, anybody wants, especially kids in that situation, is they want safety.
Safety, of course. Yeah.
They want protection and safety.
Yeah.
And they and back when that happened, they don't get it.
Mhm.
So the intent here is to go back in time to that little kid and
But
help provide that safety.
I like that safety. Yeah. And let that
Well,
people leave
that-
that situation.
yeah. Now that sounds magical, which it is, and people maybe have a hard time believing that. Scientifically, we humans go back in time and literally change the story,
Mhm.
change the past. Well, a lot of scientists actually agree with that.
Mhm.
A lot of scientists, like Einstein level scientists, will say, well, you can alter the past. Or some other scientists say there's not a lot of difference between the past, present, and future.
Mhm.
But that's a whole nother subject that that's hard to make sense of. But in this case with trauma, I was able to do that. And every time I did it successfully, the trauma literally left me.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that's interesting that people, if they don't understand, is when this trauma comes back into you, it's not just the memory that comes back. The emotion comes
Mm-hmm.
back. The smells, the sights, the sounds,
Mm.
everything comes back. And not just that, there's more to it. When that little kid was scared to death,
Mm.
the body produced hormones that shot through your system,
Mm.
cortisol and adrenaline, those fight or flight panic hormones. When you re-experience it as an adult, those same hormones
Mm.
come pumping right into your system.
Yeah.
It all comes back. That's what makes it so awful.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're reliving that as an adult, you you are literally reliving all of it. The only difference is you don't have the abuser standing right in front of you.
Mm.
And so that's the magical part of healing, that if I had one message to send, it would be that that idea is possible. Now, I'm really curious, you as somebody who is a therapist and works with people, I'm very curious what you have to say about that.
No, actually, I have to say that you describe it so great, because this is actually what in therapy I'm doing. I discovered over the years when I was looking for how to recover from the trauma and becoming therapist in that way, that exactly what I'm doing with people in therapy, that I'm taking them back through I call it the journey on the mind, taking them back to the childhood, to that not always exact traumatic moment, but to that moment where they could release that stuck emotions. Because as you said, the trauma is created by that stuck emotions, that fear, that anger, that feel loneliness, and it's stuck there, and it's I call it kind of boiling inside us, and sometimes flushing out outbursts of anger, panic attacks, or freezing, or be depressed. It's overwhelming, and can be physical pain, can be headaches, can be gaining the weight because body just trying to create some protective layers, and we going back and we releasing that emotions, exactly as you're saying, just name it what the emotions really is, and let it go, and tell that little child, you are safe now, it's okay, you are not there anymore, you become adult age, you survived, and you are safe now, and as you're saying, it's look like magic, but it's working, and I see that it's almost what only one function how actually recover from severe trauma, because until we release that emotions from past, until we not name them and not let them go out of the body, and we are not speaking and reconnecting with that inner child, we cannot recover. So I'm really glad that your story is successful, and that is also kind of confirming that what I came through, and to what I'm doing with my clients to help them. You wrote a book about your story, is it?
Yeah, these the other thing I would add to what you just said is
Mm-hmm.
um, to go back to those memories is really awful.
It is.
And and I don't know this, but my belief would be that many people do not heal because they don't want to go back to that awfulness. It is so painful. Who wants to go back and face that pain? And so it's much easier, human nature, it's much easier to just avoid it.
Mm.
Or it's much easier to just say, well, that's my familiarity. I'm familiar with that. And
Mm.
I can live with that. And I don't have to go face this ugly thing. Um, and so they don't. And I don't know if this is true or not, but I would tend to think that if they choose not to face it, then they choose not to heal.
You are right.
Do you think to be the case in your work?
Yeah, I think that people need to decide to really heal, need to decide that they will do whatever. And the part of it is that willingness to look back and face it. And But I think that important is that it's not necessarily faced all of it in the moment when it's kind of guided, that release, then it's actually going in quite big batches, I would say. So people kind of doesn't need to really look. And also important is that realization that it's in the moment when it's stopping just coming up unprepared, that will just hit you. When it just hit you, it's really like reliving it. But when it's actually therapeutically look at that, then it's more, it's possible, you feel the emotions, but they are not painful. It's not, we're releasing them, and the emotional release is there. People who's crying, people who's screaming, but there is no that pain. There is no that emotional pain in that level. And it's feeling, of course, hard in that moment, but after that, people feel very light and very, positive. So it's hard step, and people need to be willing. And yes, you are absolutely right. If people are not willing to look at that, then they cannot heal, because until you're willing to release that, until you're willing to face the reality of the life, because there is also that step which probably you also went through, is that grieving of the childhood. Is it grieving of what it could be, what the life could be if it's will not happen? And that's grieving process. And until we are willing to look at that, what's actually happened and how it's affected our life, then we cannot grieve it, and then we cannot actually move forward from it.
I also look at it like it's possible with many people that you had more than one traumatic event.
Of course.
And if you're like the bus driver, and in the back of the bus are a bunch of little versions of you, and if you were, let's say, if you were abused 100 times, just to put a number out there, it's possible that there are 100 little versions of you on your bus. And it's possible that with that sometimes you can go heal several of them at the same time.
Yeah.
If they went through a very similar trauma, like over and over and over. But it's also possible that you may have to go back to each one of those events, all 100. It's possible, and battle and name that emotion, and go through that process of helping that little person find safety. And in the process of that, you have to ugly side of it. And so one of the challenges with abuse, especially long-term abuse, is that you don't really know how many kids are on your bus.
Yeah, that's true. You don't know.
Right? And so in my case, when the memories started coming back, I had no idea how many I would have to face. And there were hundreds of them. And it took me about 9 months. And in that 9 months, I was literally facing a trauma almost every day. With that many of them. And it took and the other challenge here too is that if I would say is that if you can pace these out a little bit, if you can face one and then give your body a little time to recover and do another, take it. But in my case, I didn't have the choice. They came one right after another. And by the time I got through that 9-month period, cortisol and that adrenaline dump on my body continually, my health went from fairly healthy to I lost a lot of weight. I could barely walk from here to the next room. And had I kept going on that trajectory, it would have killed me. Literally, my health went from, let's say, 100 down to 10 in 9 months. And so there is an actual physical effect of this healing that is not fun to go through. And I had no idea. I learned as I lived through it. But if I could share some advice to people who are going through this, and be aware of that. This can have a massive ill effect on your body. You can get very sick. Your defense system can get weakened. And as you know, with cortisol and adrenaline dumps on your body, they take your blood and they push your blood to your feet and to your arms, and they basically harm your organs. And your whole digestive system, many of your organs can get badly affected through this
Mm.
process. And so there's a very physical component to this. And then on the heels, after I went through my last ones, I've had to go through a recovery process.
Mm.
I had to slowly gain my strength back, slowly. Um, I remember about 2 months after that, I tried doing one push-up.
Yeah.
I
Can be
couldn't even
hard.
do a push-up. I
Mm.
got halfway done. It literally wiped me out.
Mm.
So there's two sides of that recovery. You know, it's like I've got to get my strength back up, but I also have to be able to recover from an exercise.
Nice. Mm.
If I could walk 20 feet and do okay, that's great.
Mm.
If I walk 20 feet and I'm completely exhausted and it takes me 2 days to recover,
Mm.
well, that's a whole nother part of this.
Yeah.
And so uh, that's another aspect of this that is not fun.
Mm.
It's not exciting. And it's possible that many people would rather live with the bad effects of their trauma than have to go through that to
Mm.
overcome it.
And that is also that other side of it, that sometimes actually people have these physical effects already without recognizing that they are a result of that body
Yes.
battling the trauma. So if it's the fibromyalgia, if it's the gout, if it's the rheumatitis, autoimmune diseases, you know, they are very often when we actually look, and I work with people that they suffer with physical pain. When we actually start working with them on that physical pain, we actually find out that the reasons are actually trauma. So it's kind of both way. And
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I actually absolutely hear you. It is challenging, and it's why I'm working. I have like 3 month program for people, because I'm saying it's not cannot be solved all at once. It will be too overwhelming. So I'm working with the people with 3 months to kind of lift it up to and guide them through that release. And also I'm using the hypnotherapy, so they get daily recording, which is helping the body not to go to this severe reactions, and have it ease it up so they can still function if they, for example, working. But you are absolutely right that trauma affecting the body, and a lot of people suffer with the panic attacks can be so severe that people are really freezing, they cannot move, they feel sick, nauseous. Some people would start to have the headaches or joint pain, or like on unknown pain from somewhere. IBS, stomach pains, so it's often and we kind of put it all under diagnosis complex PTSD, but that's so wide diagnosed, that Dr. Levin writes that if we will have to write all symptoms, it will be 15 pages. We will actually, but everything it's covered in complex PTSD and how it can manifest in the body. So you had really hard way of recovery, but I'm really glad that it's worked for you and you get through it. And yeah, it's of course people who suffer repeatedly, really, like in childhood, daily, or that it's take longer time because it's very ingrained, it's very embedded in the body and mind, and it's take time to change it and release it from body. But it's really great that your story is telling that it's possible for even for people with so severe trauma from childhood can get better. And I really admire your art. I like art, and my son is very artistic, so I'm really looking to on your paintings. How did you paint even before, or you start now as inspiration from recovery, or it was your always something you did?
That's interesting because prior to last year, I had no memory of any of this abuse.
Mm-hmm.
59 years, zero memory. And yet, what now that the memories have come back, I could put everything together. I look back on my life, and I've done many art pieces throughout the years that have to do with child abuse, and I never knew why.
Mm-hmm.
I never really connected the dots.
Mhm.
When my father passed away about 10, 15 years ago, um, and he was one of the bad
Mhm.
people who did this to us. And
Mhm.
so when he died, I remember going to the funeral home with a couple of my siblings and seeing his body there, and I felt nothing.
Mhm.
Well, that's not normal.
Mhm.
Usually, if your father dies and you love your father, you feel a lot of grief.
Yeah.
I felt nothing, and it bothered me why I felt nothing.
Mhm.
Now I know why.
Mhm.
So when I look back, now that the memories have come, when I look back upon my life and over the decades, things are starting to add up. So as an artist, I'm fortunate that I've been able to do art my whole life. The book that I have has like 60 pieces of art in it,
Mm.
and
Super.
many of those pieces are paintings I did recently. But
Mhm.
many I've done years and years ago, and I just have held on to them,
Mhm.
and they fit.
Yeah.
They strangely fit. There's one painting I just uncovered covered recently before I published the book, and it's of this kid just screaming,
Mhm.
and there's like a door behind him, like he's either locked in or locked out of a door. And I did that when I was probably in my 20s.
Mhm.
I had zero idea.
Mhm.
So it's fascinating. And then, so the first part of the book talks about what we're talking about, the what trauma is, how it affects the body, the hormones, the idea of going back in time and changing the narrative, the whole healing process. And then the last half of the book are 22 stories of actual traumatic events that chronicle uh, the hurt coming upon me, identifying the feeling, going back to that little guy,
Mhm.
helping him change the narrative, and the magical outcome, and what actually happened in that trauma. It's interesting that not some of the stories are just awful,
Mhm.
like just horrible abuse, being buried alive, things like that. Um, and other traumatic events aren't as bloody, like maybe uh, being lost
Mhm.
or discarded or being or not being heard.
Mhm.
Because as a kid, this is happening to you. You want to tell somebody, and nobody in the household listens to you or believes
Mhm.
you. That can be traumatic,
Yeah, that's true.
right? And so it doesn't have to always be rape and blood and
Mhm.
torture, although that was part of it. And so I picked out 22 out of hundreds that I thought that kind of covered a broad spectrum from really awful to more of these things. And I tell each one of those stories what happened and how it was healed. And each time it actually worked.
Mhm.
When that little kid was given that or created that safety, all of that for that one episode out of hundreds, for that one episode left me. All the ill effects, all the
Mhm.
bad hormonal effects, all the bad emotions left me. I still remember them, but when
Mhm.
I think about them, or if I talk to you about them, I don't get the bad effects.
Yeah.
I get sad. I get very
Mhm.
sad.
Of course.
And then, uh, and then on the heels of that, I've started a nonprofit.
Mhm.
And the idea of it's called Rescue 11, rescue11.org.
Mhm.
And our mission is to protect children. And so we go into communities and we help communities understand that these perpetrators, these evil people, are often right communities.
Mhm.
Sometimes they are the mayor of your town.
Mhm.
Sometimes they are a coach at your high school. These terrible people, they gravitate towards organizations that deal with kids.
Mhm. Of course. Yeah.
And so grammar schools, Boy Scouts, orphanages
Mhm.
who help kids, often they will want to work with orphanages so they can gain access to kids. And they're really good and they're really smart. And if you can imagine in your community, there's somebody who wakes up every day and actively thinks about how can I steal your kid?
Mm.
These are the worst people of the worst people on the earth.
Mm.
And the things that they want to do to your kids are just horrifically awful.
Mm.
And they're sadists. The definition of the term sadist
Okay.
is somebody who gets joy inflicting pain on another person.
Yeah, yeah.
And these are the worst sadists because they enjoy inflicting pain on the most innocent children.
Mm.
And they're cowards because children can't fight back.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're a little child and this happens to you, you can't do anything.
Mm.
They threaten you, they lie to you, they coerce you, they try to get you to believe that what they're doing is in the name of some god or something like that.
Mm.
It's all just a big lie. And they enjoy every bit of it. And if they can get that kid to scream louder and to have more fear, they
Mm.
enjoy it more.
Mm.
And these are just the most awful people, and they ruin lives.
Mm.
So many kids this happens to, as you know, they grow up into adulthood and their whole life is ruined.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And they die, and their life is ruined, and they die, and that's it.
Mm.
It's a sad legacy.
Mm. Yeah, because many don't cope with that, as a result, a lot of people end up with a drug abuse or
Yes.
alcohol or other things, just trying to numb that pain inside, is it? And they're just trying to find a way to cope and not really coping and ending up very early in their lives, and that's really sad. And yeah, so that's great that you're working, trying to protect the children. That's really important job to do, and I think it's also very important helping the parents who the traumatized adults and which they have the children, because it's very hard not to pass on trauma. Sometimes you're passing on, and we don't want to, but you know, when people have the outburst of anger or they don't know why they are reacting how they're reacting from their trauma, they passing it on in different form, but they don't want to. So it's very important to make people understand how trauma affect them as the adults, and that many things can be changed and stop that break the cycle to passing on and
Yeah.
and help the children not to be. And it's very often very sad to speak. I'm working with also some teenagers or young children just leaving the families where they are abused, and it's really hard for them because they're getting help. It's very hard because they not make any money, or they are in the school or something. And of course, therapies are available, but not for free, or not these therapies which would help them. So it's the one thing which I'm trying to do, and have some pro bono hours for those who cannot afford it, but really need it to help these young ones to recover quicker, so they will not have to look decades back and going through, realize how their lives was destroyed.
Yeah.
But can start sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's some hope in this whole messy thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's why I'm doing this podcast, because I definitely think that people need to have that hope that it can recover, and I'm really thankful that you came and share your story. And let's say the people, if they want to read your book, I think it will be available on Amazon, and the book name is A Heal from Jimmi Toro, our today guest, and it will be definitely very interesting to read your story and yours. And looking on your art, I have to say, really interesting art. And so thank you very much for coming as the guest to our podcast, and I hope that it's bring the hope for people. So what will be your closing words for our listeners?
There is a classic story told throughout history where like in medieval times, a knight will have to go outside the castle walls and go rescue the princess from the dragon, right? That's a classic story, and a version of that has been told throughout time. Well, As soon as that knight steps outside of the castle walls, that's where the danger is.
Mm.
And so if you feel that you have some trauma you need to go clean up, it's very possible that you need to go step outside of your castle walls where the danger is.
Mm.
And you need to go confront your dragons. And it's not easy, and not everybody makes it. But if you succeed and you bring that princess back, you're a hero. If you don't succeed, or you quit halfway and you come home, that's not a heroic journey.
Mm.
And so I would encourage anybody who thinks they're dealing with trauma or dealing with anything, is that they have a heroic journey to go on. And if they can succeed, and with help, people like you, there's nothing better in this world than to go on a heroic journey and face what you fear, face it head on. If you do, you will mitigate, or you will stop a lot of that adverse hormonal dump in your body.
Mm.
Your body, if you willingly face it head on, you will get the advantage of positive hormones that come into your body, and you will counteract those awful ones.
Mm.
And so that would be my plea to people out there is go face what's really hard, and it's magical if you do. You really can release this stuff, and good people like you. It's important to find somebody like Barb who can guide you on this, but you have to do it. You can only guide them. You can't
Yeah.
go with them.
Yeah, I can only guide them.
Yeah, and then I know you're across the world from me, but if anybody wants to contact me, they can go to my website, Jimmi, Jimmi Toro, Toro.com. I do have a book for sale. It's really fascinating. And I have a charity that I've started. And if you want to be involved in my charity and want to get a hold of me, I'll bet we could find a way. Help us spread the word in communities that these awful people are doing this to our children. That is my mission in life. So I really, Barb, I really appreciate you giving me a platform to help in this way. I appreciate your kindness and your willingness, and maybe if I'm in Scotland one day, we could hang out.
Yeah, we can hang out for sure. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on. It was a good pleasure. I'm really glad that I could meet you and learn about your story, and maybe we will see. Maybe when we meet some next time. So that will be all from today's episode of Way Out of Childhood Trauma, and I will see you and hear you next week with Lela. And please follow or subscribe, or you can contact the Jimmi on the jimmitoro.com and look up on his new book and his beautiful art. So thank you. Bye.
Thank you. All right. See you later.